Last fall, I did something that still keeps me up at night. I saved the life of something that, according to everything I know about the world, shouldn't exist. And what happened next changed how I see the wilderness forever. This isn't about bragging or trying to convince anyone of anything. It's about what happened when I made a split-second decision to help a creature that was dying right in front of me. A creature with a face too human to ignore. It was mid-October, right in the heart of hunting season. I live in a remote part of Alaska, the kind of place where the nearest town is 40 miles away, and the nearest real city might as well be on another planet. I'd been hunting these woods for over 15 years, and I knew them like most people know their neighborhood streets. Every fall, I head out to stock up meat for winter. It's not a hobby for me. With a family to feed and winters that can last 7 months, those hunting trips are necessary. I left the house around 5 in the morning before the sun came up. The temperature was already below freezing, and the forecast called for overcast skies all day. Typical October weather for Alaska, nothing unusual. I packed my gear the night before like I always do. My rifle, a reliable hunting knife, emergency supplies including a flare, first aid kit, extra ammunition, rope, and my usual food and water. I checked my rifle twice like I always do, grabbed some jerky and water, and headed out. The plan was to hike about 6 or 7 miles into the dense forest where I'd had luck the previous year. Good moose territory, maybe some caribou if I was lucky. The drive to the trailhead took about an hour. The roads out here are barely roads at all, more like suggestions of where vehicles used to go. Gravel and dirt, full of potholes, winding through thick forest. I passed maybe 2 other vehicles the whole drive, both heading the opposite direction. Probably other hunters finishing up their trips. I parked at my usual spot, a small pull-off where the road basically ends. There were no other vehicles, which was good. I prefer hunting alone, and I definitely prefer not competing for territory with other hunters. The sun was just starting to think about coming up, that pre-dawn gray light that makes everything look flat and colorless. The hike in was uneventful at first, cold, quiet, the kind of morning where your breath hangs in the air and every step on the frozen ground sounds louder than it should. The trail I followed wasn't really a trail, just a route I'd taken enough times that I knew the way. Through dense spruce forest, over a couple of small streams, up gradual inclines, my legs warmed up after the first mile, and I settled into that comfortable rhythm you get when you're doing something you've done 100 times before. I'd been walking for maybe 2 hours, covering about 4 miles, when I started noticing something odd. Actually, odd isn't the right word. Unsettling is better. The forest was too quiet. At first, I didn't think much of it. Sometimes the woods are just quiet, but as I kept walking, it started to feel wrong. I stopped to take a drink of water and realized I hadn't heard a single bird call in over an hour. Not one, no ravens, no jays, nothing. And I hadn't seen any squirrels either, which was strange because they're usually everywhere, chattering and jumping from tree to tree. I stood there for a solid 5 minutes, just listening. Nothing. Not even the rustle of small animals in the underbrush. Just the sound of wind in the trees and the occasional creak of branches. It was like every living thing in the forest had packed up and left. Now, I know what you're thinking. Forests are quiet, right? Wrong, at least not in Alaska, not usually. There's always something. Birds calling to each other, squirrels rustling through the underbrush, the distant sound of a stream, a raven cawing, mice scurrying through dead leaves, something. But that morning, there was nothing. Just my footsteps and my breathing, and this oppressive silence that seemed to press in from all sides. I started checking for tracks more carefully. In my experience, when the forest goes completely silent like that, it usually means there's a predator nearby. A grizzly maybe, or a pack of wolves. Animals have a sixth sense about these things. They clear out when something dangerous is in the area. The smaller animals hide, the birds stop calling, everything just freezes and waits for the danger to pass. So I look for tracks in the patches of frost and soft ground. Bear tracks, moose, caribou, wolf, anything that might explain the silence. But I found nothing fresh. Everything I saw was at least a day or two old. I found some moose tracks that looked to be from yesterday, some old bear scat that was dried out and probably 3 or 4 days old, and some ptarmigan tracks near a berry bush. But nothing that would explain why the entire forest seemed to be holding its breath. The unease started building in my gut. That feeling you get when something's not right, but you can't put your finger on exactly what. It's a primal feeling. Something left over from when our ancestors had to worry about being eaten. Your body knows something is wrong before your brain figures it out. I seriously considered turning back. My instincts were screaming at me that something was off. But I needed the meat. Winter was coming fast, and I hadn't had a successful hunt yet that season. I'd gone out twice already and come back empty-handed. My freezer was looking pretty empty, and we were looking at a long winter, so I pushed on, telling myself I was being paranoid, that I'd gone hunting in quiet forests before, and it was fine. I kept my rifle ready though, safety off, round in the chamber, finger near the trigger, but not on it, just in case. I'd gone maybe another mile when I heard it. At first it was so faint I thought I was imagining it. A sound in the distance. Maybe half a mile away, maybe more. It was hard to tell with the way sound travels in the mountains. But as I stood there listening, it got louder and stranger. It was a roar. Deep, powerful, unmistakably a grizzly bear. I'd heard that sound before, and it never fails to make your blood run cold. It's not like a lion's roar or anything you hear in a zoo. It's deeper, more guttural, and it vibrates in your chest. Grizzlies don't make noise like that unless they're aggressive, unless they're fighting or defending something or warning something away. But mixed in with that roar was something else, something that made the hair on the back of my neck stand up and my skin break out in goosebumps despite the cold. Screaming, but not quite human. It had that quality of a human scream, that pitch and desperation, but it was wrong. Too deep, too guttural, like someone had taken a human voice and dropped it 2 octaves and added this raw, primal quality to it. The kind of sound that shouldn't come from anything that walks on 2 legs. It was the kind of sound that hits you in your chest, that makes some ancient part of your brain scream at you to run, to climb a tree, to hide. The sounds continued, the grizzly roaring, aggressive and angry, that other thing screaming, a sound of pain and fury mixed together. And underneath it all, the sounds of violence, branches breaking with loud cracks, heavy impacts like massive bodies slamming into trees or the ground. The crash of underbrush being destroyed, the thud of something big hitting something else big. I stood there frozen, trying to make sense of it. My first thought was that someone was out here, that some hiker or hunter had stumbled into a bear. But that didn't make sense for a lot of reasons. First, nobody hikes this deep into the wilderness casually. You don't accidentally end up 6 miles into dense forest. Second, the sounds I was hearing didn't sound like a person fighting a bear. I've heard recordings of bear attacks on people, listened to safety briefings, read incident reports. This wasn't that. This sounded like 2 massive animals trying to kill each other. 2 things of roughly equal size and power having an all-out brawl. The sounds continued for what felt like forever, but was probably only a minute or 2. The roaring, the screaming, the crashes. And they were getting more desperate, more frantic, like whatever was happening was reaching a critical point. Every bit of training and experience I had told me to stay the hell away. You don't go toward a grizzly bear fight, you go in literally any other direction, fast. You put distance between yourself and whatever is making those sounds because nothing good can come from getting involved. Bears are unpredictable and dangerous, and an aggressive bear in the middle of a fight is about the worst thing you can encounter in the wilderness. But those sounds, those screams, they were too human. The pitch was wrong and the quality was wrong, but there was something in them that triggered every protective instinct I had. What if someone actually was in trouble? What if some hunter like me was out here, injured, being attacked? What if there was a person out there dying while I stood here doing nothing? I knew it was probably stupid. I knew I was possibly about to get myself killed, but I couldn't walk away. Not without at least seeing what was happening, not without knowing if someone needed help. I checked my rifle again, made absolutely sure I had a round chambered and the safety was off. Made sure I had extra round in my pocket where I could reach them quickly. Checked that my knife was secure in its sheath. Then I started moving toward the sounds, carefully, slowly, keeping to the thickest parts of the forest where I had cover. My heart was hammering in my chest so hard I could hear it in my ears. My hands were sweating despite the cold, making my grip on the rifle slippery. I kept having to wipe them on my jacket. The sounds got louder as I approached. The roaring, the screaming, the crashes. Whatever was happening, it was getting more desperate, more violent. I could hear the impact of bodies colliding, the snap of branches, the heavy breathing of something big pushing itself to its limits. I moved from tree to tree, trying to stay quiet, trying to get close enough to see what was going on without getting myself killed in the process. Every few steps, I'd stop and listen, trying to judge how much closer I was getting. The sounds echoed strangely in the forest, making it hard to pinpoint exactly where they were coming from. As I got closer, maybe within 100 yards, I started being able to distinguish individual sounds more clearly. The grizzly's roars were coming in bursts, aggressive and sustained. The other sounds, those screaming sounds, were more defensive, pained. There were grunts too, deep ones that rumbled, and sharp exhalations like something getting hit hard and having the wind knocked out of it. I positioned myself behind a thick cluster of spruce trees about 50 yards from where the sounds were coming from. Through the branches, I could see movement in a small clearing ahead. Massive shapes, dark fur moving fast, the flash of something pale, maybe claws or teeth. I took a deep breath, tried to slow my racing heart, and moved closer. I picked my way forward carefully, testing each step before putting my weight down, trying not to snap any twigs or rustle any leaves. 20 yards closer, then 10. I positioned myself behind a fallen log that gave me cover and a clear line of sight into the clearing. What I saw when I got a clear view made me stop breathing. There was a grizzly bear in that clearing, a huge one, probably 800 pounds, maybe more. I've seen a lot of grizzlies in my time, and this was one of the bigger ones. Aggressive, angry, moving with that terrible speed that grizzlies have despite their size. Its fur was standing up, making it look even bigger. Its mouth was open, showing teeth that could crack bones, saliva dripping, eyes focused and intent. This was a bear that was committed to the fight. But it wasn't attacking a person, it was fighting something I'd never seen before, something that shouldn't exist. The creature was massive, 8 or 9 feet tall when it stood fully upright, covered in dark brown fur. Not quite black, but a deep chocolate brown that was matted in places with what looked like old dirt and debris. It walked on 2 legs like a human, but it was built like nothing human. Broad shoulders, probably 4 feet across, a barrel chest that suggested incredible strength, arms that looked like they could tear a tree out of the ground, thick with muscle even under the fur, legs that were shorter proportionally than a human's, but incredibly powerful looking like tree trunks. Its face. That's what got me. That's what made my brain short circuit trying to process what I was seeing. Its face was partially ape-like, with a pronounced brow ridge and a flat, wide nose. The jaw was heavy, prognathic, jutting forward. But there was something human about it too. The eyes were set forward like a human's, not to the side like most animals. The expression on that face was too complex, too nuanced to be just an animal. There was thought there, awareness, intelligence. And it was fighting for its life with only one arm. The creature's left arm hung useless at its side, swinging limply as it moved. Even from 40 yards away, I could see something was wrong with it. It looked withered, smaller than the other arm, the muscles atrophied. The shoulder seemed set at an odd angle, like it had been dislocated or broken long ago and never healed right. Maybe an old injury from a fight or a fall. Maybe it had been born that way. I don't know. But it clearly had no use of that arm at all. The creature was trying to fight off the grizzly with just its right arm. It had grabbed a large branch off the ground, probably 6 feet long and thick as my forearm, and was using it like a club, swinging it at the bear, trying to keep distance between them. But the bear was relentless. It kept coming, circling, looking for an opening. Every time the creature swung the branch, the bear would duck back, then immediately press forward again. The bear was testing the creature, probing for weakness, and it was finding it. I watched the fight unfold, and I couldn't move. My brain was trying to process what I was seeing. This thing couldn't be real. It looked exactly like every description I'd ever heard of a Bigfoot or Sasquatch. The size, the build, the fur, the face. But those were myths, stories people told, blurry photos and obvious hoaxes. They didn't exist. There was no scientific evidence for them, no bodies, no bones, nothing concrete. Just stories and legends and alleged sightings that always turned out to be bears, or people in costumes or misidentifications. Yet here it was, right in front of me, bleeding and desperate and very, very real. The creature was tiring. I could see it in the way it moved. Its swings with the branch were getting slower, less forceful. It was breathing hard, its massive chest heaving with each breath. Blood was running down its torso from several wounds on its chest and shoulder where the bear had gotten past its defenses. Its face. I keep coming back to that, because that's what made me decide what I did next. There was fear in those eyes, real, genuine terror, the kind of fear I'd seen in the eyes of wounded animals, the kind that knows death is coming. But there was more than that. There was intelligence there, awareness. This wasn't a dumb animal acting on instinct. This was a thinking being that knew it was about to die and was desperate to prevent it. The grizzly was winning, it was obvious. The creature was losing ground with every exchange, backing up step by step as the bear pressed forward. The bear was getting bolder, pressing the attack harder, getting closer with each swipe of its massive paws. Its claws, easily 4 inches long, were leaving deep gouges in trees when they missed the creature. One good hit would be devastating. It was only a matter of time. The creature stumbled, its foot catching on something in the undergrowth. It went down to one knee, struggling to get back up with only one arm functional. The bear saw the opening and charged. The creature managed to swing the branch up just in time, catching the bear in the snout with a solid hit that made an audible crack. The bear reared back, shaking its head, stunned. The creature used the moment to scramble back to its feet, but I could see it was near the end. It was swaying, nearly done. I had maybe 10 seconds to make a decision, walk away, pretend I never saw this, or do something. That face, that too human face filled with fear and desperation and that awful awareness of impending death made the choice for me. I considered shooting the bear. I had my rifle. I had a clear shot. But grizzlies are tough, incredibly tough. One shot might not drop it, especially not immediately. And if it didn't drop, the bear would either turn on me or keep attacking the creature, now even more aggressive because it was wounded. Either way, someone was dying. Maybe everyone. I've heard too many stories of grizzly attacks where the bear took multiple rounds and kept fighting. I didn't want to add my name to that list. Then I remembered something in my pack, an emergency flare, the kind you use if you get lost or injured and need rescue. Bright red, burns at thousands of degrees, makes a loud hissing noise, and throws off sparks. Bears hate fire. They hate loud noises. They hate things that burn and spark and move unpredictably. It might work. It was probably my best option. I reached into my pack as quietly as I could, feeling around until my hand closed on the flare. The cylinder was cold in my hand, the cap tight. I pulled it out, grabbed my rifle awkwardly in my other hand, and stepped out from behind the log. Both creatures stopped fighting immediately. The sudden appearance of a third party in their fight shocked them both into stillness. They both turned to look at me. For a moment, everything was completely still, frozen. A man, a grizzly bear, and a Bigfoot, all staring at each other in a clearing in the middle of nowhere. The bear's eyes locked onto mine. I saw the calculation happening. New threat? New prey? Worth fighting? The creature just stared, its chest heaving, barely able to stay standing. Blood was dripping steadily from its wounds. I fumbled with the flare cap, got it off, and struck it against the striker. The flare burst to life with a bright red flame and a loud hiss. Sparks flew, smoke billowed. The sudden burst of light and sound and smell made both creatures flinch. I held the flare up high, made myself as big as I could, and started moving forward, slowly, deliberately, trying to look bigger and more dangerous than I felt. Every muscle in my body was screaming at me that this was insane, that I was going to die, that bears kill people who do exactly what I was doing. The bear turned its full attention from the creature to me. It rose up on its hind legs, standing at least 8 feet tall, and roared. The sound hit me like a physical force. I could smell it. That awful bear smell of fur and meat, and something wild and dangerous. Every instinct I had told me to run. But I didn't run. I held my ground. I pointed the flare at the bear and took another step forward. The bear dropped back to all fours, its head swinging back and forth, trying to figure out what this thing was that had invaded its fight. I took another step. Then another. I was yelling now, making as much noise as I could, waving the flare in wide arcs over my head. The smoke trail followed it, creating patterns in the air. The bear backed up a step. Then another. It looked confused. The bright light, the hissing sound, the smoke, the smell of the burning flare. It didn't know what to make of it. This wasn't part of its normal experience. I took another step forward. The flare was burning hot in my hand now. I could feel the heat even through my glove. The bear took several steps backward, its head swinging between me and the creature, like it was trying to decide if this fight was still worth it. Was the wounded creature worth dealing with this new, unknown threat? Then it made its decision. It turned and crashed into the forest, moving fast for something so big, disappearing into the trees. I heard it crashing through the underbrush for maybe 30 seconds, the sound growing fainter, until it was gone completely. I stood there, flare still burning in my hand, trying to process what I'd just done. My entire body was shaking. Adrenaline does that to you. My legs felt weak. My hands were trembling so badly I almost dropped the flare. I just chased off an 800-pound grizzly bear with nothing but a flare and attitude. That shouldn't have worked. I should be dead. We should both be dead. The creature was still standing there about 20 feet away, staring at me. Up close, with nothing between us, it was even more massive than I'd thought. Easily 9 feet tall, maybe more. Its chest was heaving, breathing hard. each breath visible in the cold air. Blood was dripping from several wounds on its torso and its good arm, deep gouges that needed treatment. It looked exhausted, completely spent. The fight, the fear, the adrenaline crash, it was all hitting at once. I watched as its legs started to shake. Then, slowly, like a building collapsing in slow motion, it dropped to its knees, just collapsed, like someone had cut the strings holding it up. It knelt there in the clearing, head down, barely able to hold itself upright. Its good arm was braced on the ground, keeping it from falling over completely. Its breathing was ragged, gasping. I stayed where I was, keeping my distance, not sure what to do next. The flare was still burning in my hand, and I stuck it in the ground between us, still upright so it wouldn't go out. Not as a threat, just as a light source, and maybe as a barrier, however symbolic, between us. A marker, my space, its space. We stayed like that for a long moment, both of us trying to catch our breath, both of us probably in shock. Me trying to process what I'd just done, what I was looking at. The creature trying to process that it was still alive, that something had intervened, that it had survived something it shouldn't have. I slowly, carefully reached into my pack again. My hands were still shaking. I pulled out my water flask and a couple of pieces of beef jerky. The flask was one of those metal ones, insulated with a screw top. The jerky was the good kind, thick and chewy. I held them up so the creature could see them clearly, making sure my movements were slow and obvious. Then I tossed them on the ground about halfway between us. Not close enough to be threatening, not close enough that I'd have to get within reach of those massive arms, but close enough that it could reach them without having to move much. The creature's head lifted slowly. It looked at the items lying in the dirt and pine needles. Then it looked at me. Its eyes met mine, and I swear I saw understanding there. Recognition of what I was doing. Gratitude. Those eyes were incredible up close. Dark brown, almost black, but with depth to them. Not animal eyes, not human eyes either. Something else, something in between. It reached out with its good arm, slowly, clearly in pain from the movement. The arm was longer than a human's, with thick muscles visible under the fur. Its hand was huge, easily twice the size of mine, with 5 fingers that ended in what looked like thick nails or maybe small claws. It picked up the water flask first, fumbling with it for a moment. The cap was clearly a challenge. Its fingers, despite their size, seemed to work, grasping the cap and trying to turn it. After a few seconds of struggle, it got the cap off and drank. Long, desperate gulps that made its throat work. It drank the entire flask, probably 1.5 liters of water, without stopping. When it finished drinking, it set the flask down carefully, almost gently, and picked up the jerky. It sniffed it first, a long inhalation that made its nostrils flare. Then it ate the jerky quickly, tearing off chunks with its teeth and swallowing them almost without chewing. The teeth I could see looked more human than ape, but larger, stronger. When it finished eating, it looked back at me and did something that made my throat tight. It nodded, a slow, deliberate nod, just like a human would. Then it bowed its head slightly, a gesture that was unmistakable, a gesture of thanks, clear as day. I nodded back, not sure what else to do. My mind was racing. This thing understood gestures. It understood that I'd helped it. It was communicating with me. This wasn't an animal. This was something else entirely. We stayed there for a long time, maybe 10 minutes, maybe 15. I lost track, just sitting in that clearing, looking at each other. The flare burned out eventually, the red flame dying down to nothing, leaving just a stick with some smoke coming off it. But neither of us moved. The creature sat there, occasionally wincing when it moved wrong and the pain from its wounds flared up. It was bleeding less now, which was good, but it still looked rough. It studied me as much as I studied it, those dark eyes taking in every detail. What was it thinking? What did it make of me? Was it as confused by me as I was by it? I found myself studying every detail I could see. The fur was coarser than it looked from a distance, more like thick hair than actual fur. In some places, it hung in long strands, almost like dreadlocks, matted with dirt and debris. In other places, it was shorter, showing more of the body shape underneath. The hands were incredible. 5 fingers, just like a human, but larger. The palm was broad and thick. The fingers had joints that bent like human fingers. There were lines in the palm, creases like you'd see on a human hand. The fingernails were thick and dark, more like horn than nail. Its feet were bare and massive, easily 18 inches long, maybe more. 5 toes that splayed out for balance. The sole looked thick and calloused, adapted for walking on rough terrain. I could see old scars on its legs and good arm, pale lines through the fur where injuries had healed long ago. Its face, despite the ape-like features, had expressions I could read: exhaustion, pain, relief, wariness, but also curiosity. It was studying me as much as I was studying it, and I wondered what it saw. A strange, hairless creature that walked on 2 legs like it did but was much smaller. A creature that had chased away the bear. A creature that had given it food and water. Friend? Threat? Ally? Unknown? The creature tried to stand up. It pushed itself up with its good arm, got its legs under it, and tried to rise. But it couldn't quite make it. Without the use of that left arm, it couldn't balance properly. It got about halfway up, wobbled, and fell back down heavily, landing hard on its knees. A grunt of frustration escaped it, a sound that was more human than animal. The sound of someone trying to do something they should be able to do but can't. It tried again with the same result. This time it caught itself better, not falling as hard but still unable to get fully upright. I watched it struggle and I realized the problem. It needed something to push off from, some kind of support, something to substitute for that useless left arm. Without it, the creature couldn't generate enough leverage to stand from a kneeling position. It was trapped. I looked around the clearing and spotted a large branch nearby, maybe 6 feet long and thick enough to be sturdy. It was relatively straight, which was good. The kind of branch that falls off during storms but doesn't rot right away because it wasn't lying on the wet ground. I walked over to it slowly, keeping my movements obvious and non-threatening, and picked it up. It was solid oak, good and heavy but not too heavy. I examined it, testing its strength. It would work. I brought it closer to the creature, stopping about 10 feet away. The creature watched me approach with those eyes, wary but not aggressive. I held up the branch so it could see it clearly. Then I demonstrated what I was thinking. I put the branch under my armpit on the right side like it would need to use it, and showed how it could be used for support. I mimed pushing down on it and using it to help stand up, exaggerating the movement so it would be clear what I was showing. The creature watched me carefully. Its eyes followed every movement. I could see it thinking, processing what I was showing it. I demonstrated again, slower this time, making sure each step was clear. Then I stepped forward and held out the branch. For a moment, we just looked at each other. This was a moment of trust. I was close enough now that it could reach me if it wanted to. Those massive arms could grab me. Those powerful hands could crush bones. But I had to believe it wouldn't. Had to believe that it understood I was helping. The creature reached out with its good arm, slowly, carefully, its hand wrapped around the branch, dwarfing it, and took it from me. Our fingers were maybe 6 inches apart when it took the branch. I could see the individual hairs on his arm, see the way the muscles moved under the skin and fur. I could smell it too, a musky smell that was strong but not unpleasant, like wet dog mixed with earth and pine. It took the branch and studied it for a moment, turning it in its hand, feeling the weight of it. Then it looked back at me. I demonstrated one more time, pointing to my armpit, showing the motion. And I saw the moment understanding clicked. Its eyes widened slightly, its head tilted, then it nodded. It positioned the branch under its right arm, on the right side of its body where it could use its good arm to control it. The positioning wasn't perfect at first. It had to adjust a couple of times, finding the right angle, the right placement, but it figured it out. Then, using the branch as a lever and brace, it pushed down and stood up. It worked. The creature rose to its full height, swaying slightly as it found its balance, but standing. It looked at me again, and this time the nod was deeper, more pronounced, a clear gesture of gratitude and respect. I was impressed. The intelligence I'd seen in its eyes was real. It had watched me demonstrate something completely foreign to it, understood what I was showing it, and applied it immediately. Adapted the technique to its own body and situation. That level of problem solving, that ability to understand and imitate. This wasn't an animal. This was something else entirely. The creature stood there for a moment, getting its balance with the makeshift crutch. It took a few experimental steps, figuring out the rhythm. Lean on the crutch, move the legs. Lean on the crutch, move the legs. It was clumsy at first, but got smoother quickly. Then it turned and looked at me one more time, gave another nod, and started moving. Slowly, carefully, leaning heavily on the branch. It was heading deeper into the forest, away from where I'd come from, in a direction I'd never gone. I followed. I'm still not sure why. Part of it was wanting to make sure it was safe. Part of it was probably making sure it actually left and wasn't going to circle back. But mostly, I think I was just too curious to walk away. I needed to see where it was going, needed to see where something like this lived. I kept my distance, maybe 30 feet back. Close enough to see it clearly, far enough to have some reaction time if things went wrong. My rifle was ready, not pointed at the creature, but held in a position where I could bring it up quickly if I needed to. Not because I was afraid of the creature anymore, but because that grizzly was still out there somewhere. And wounded animals, even ones that ran away, can come back. We moved through the forest like that for about a mile, a strange procession. The creature limping along with its makeshift crutch, using trees for occasional support, moving with purpose despite its injuries. And me following behind like some kind of guard or escort. The forest was still eerily quiet. No birds, no squirrels, nothing. Like everything was staying hidden while we passed through. The creature moved surprisingly quietly for its size. When it stepped, it placed its feet carefully, avoiding twigs and dry leaves when possible. When it had to push aside branches, it did so gently, letting them swing back slowly rather than snapping them. It moved like something that was used to not being seen, used to staying hidden. Every so often it would glance back at me, just a quick look over its shoulder to make sure I was still there. Not threatening, just checking, maybe making sure I wasn't getting too close. Maybe making sure I was okay, I couldn't tell. I scanned the trees constantly as we walked, watching for any sign of the bear, listening for sounds, but there was nothing. The forest remained silent. Whatever invisible signal had made everything go quiet was still in effect. After what felt like forever, but was probably about 45 minutes, we reached a rocky outcrop on the side of a small mountain. The rocks were granite, gray and weathered, jutting out of the hillside like bones pushing through skin. There was a cave there, maybe 8 feet tall at the entrance and 10 feet wide. The entrance was partially hidden by fallen logs and brush, positioned in a way that made it hard to see unless you knew exactly where to look. The creature headed straight for it. No hesitation. This wasn't random. This was home. It had been heading here the entire time, following some internal map. When it reached the entrance, it stopped and turned back to look at me one more time. We locked eyes across the 30 feet between us, another nod, deeper than the others. Then it ducked its head and disappeared inside the cave. I stood there for a few minutes just staring at the cave entrance, processing everything that had just happened. I'd followed a Bigfoot home. I'd watched it disappear into a cave that was clearly its den or nest or whatever you wanted to call it. This was real. This had actually happened. I took a few steps closer, curious about the cave, but I stopped myself. I'd pushed my luck enough for one day. The creature was wounded and exhausted. It needed rest, not some human poking around its home. I'd helped it survive. That was enough. I looked around the area, trying to memorize landmarks so I could find this place again. A distinctive cluster of 3 birch trees to the left of the outcrop. A dead spruce with a lightning scar about 50 yards away. The shape of the mountain ridge behind the rocks. I fixed it all in my mind. Then I turned around and started the long walk back to my truck. The hike back took about 2 hours, maybe a bit more. My mind raced the entire time. What had I just seen? What had I just done? The adrenaline was wearing off now, leaving me shaky and exhausted. My legs felt like jelly. Every noise made me jump, convinced the grizzly was coming back. But nothing happened. The forest slowly came back to life as I walked. I started hearing birds again, saw a couple of squirrels. The oppressive silence was gone, like whatever had caused it had passed. Should I tell someone? Who would believe me? If I told people I'd seen a Bigfoot, saved it from a grizzly, and followed it back to its cave, they'd think I was crazy, or lying, or looking for attention. Even if I led them to the cave, even if the creature was still there, would that prove anything? Would people believe it was real, or would they come up with some explanation, some way to dismiss it? I got back to my truck just as it was starting to get dark. The drive home was a blur. I barely paid attention to the road, running on autopilot. When I got home, my wife asked how it went. I told her I'd had a long day and didn't see anything worth shooting, which was technically true in a way. I mean, I wasn't going to shoot a Bigfoot. I didn't mention anything else. Not to her, not to my kids when they asked about the trip, not to anyone. I just said it had been a quiet day in the woods and I'd try again soon. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that face. That too human face filled with fear and desperation and then gratitude. I kept replaying the whole thing in my mind, the fight, the decision to help, the flare, the creature collapsing, the water and food, the crutch, following it through the forest. All of it felt surreal, like maybe I'd imagined it, like maybe it had been some kind of hallucination brought on by altitude and cold and stress. But I knew it was real. I could still smell that musky smell, could still see those eyes looking at me, could still feel the weight of that moment when I'd handed it the branch and our hands had been so close. The worry started building that first night and got worse over the next couple of days. I kept thinking about the creature alone in that cave, injured and exhausted. Could it survive with only one working arm? In the wilderness, an injured animal is as good as dead. They can't hunt properly, can't defend themselves against predators, can't even gather food efficiently. Nature doesn't care about your problems. You're either strong enough to survive or you're not. I thought about those wounds on its chest and arm. Were they getting infected? Did it have any way to treat them? Was it getting worse instead of better? The image of it collapsing to its knees, barely able to stay upright, kept playing in my mind. How close to death had it been? Would surviving the grizzly even matter if it just slowly died in that cave over the next few days? The guilt built. Maybe I hadn't done enough. Maybe saving it from the bear wasn't enough if I was just going to leave it to die slowly of starvation or infection. I'd interfered with nature, chased off the bear, and now I was responsible for what happened next. At least that's how it felt. By the third day, I'd made a decision. I had to go back. I had to check on it. I couldn't just leave it there wondering if it was okay. I needed to know. And if it needed help, I needed to help it. I started putting together supplies. I emptied my hunting pack and filled it with different things. Water bottles, 6 of them full, dried meat, the kind that lasts forever and is packed with calories, canned food, stuff that was easy to open and eat, salmon, beans, stew, energy bars, trail mix, jerky, anything I could think of that might be useful to something injured and unable to hunt. I told my wife I was going to try hunting again, try to get that moose I'd been after. She looked at me a little funny, probably wondering why I was so determined after coming back empty-handed so many times, but she didn't say anything, just told me to be safe. I drove back to the trailhead, made the hike in, and started looking for the landmarks I'd memorized. The 3 birch trees, the dead spruce, the rocky outcrop. It took me a while to find it. Everything looks different when you're not being led there by a 9-foot creature. But eventually I found the right mountain, then the right outcrop, and finally the cave entrance. I approached carefully, not sure what to expect. Would the creature still be there? Would it be okay? Would it even want me there? Maybe it had moved on. Maybe it had died. I didn't know. I stopped about 30 feet from the entrance and called out. Not loudly, just loud enough to be heard. Just a sort of general hello sound. There was no response. I got closer and called out again. Still nothing. My heart was starting to sink. Maybe it wasn't here. Maybe it had moved to a different location, somewhere I'd never find it. I reached the cave entrance and peered inside. The cave went back maybe 20 feet, opening up into a larger chamber. It was dim, with just the light from the entrance illuminating the space. My eyes adjusted slowly, and there, lying on its side in the dim light near the back of the cave, was the creature. It looked bad, really bad, worse than when I'd left it. Its fur was matted and dull. Its breathing was shallow and labored. Its eyes were open, but they looked unfocused, staring at nothing. When it heard me, its head moved slightly and its eyes found me, but there was no recognition there at first, just dull awareness that something was nearby. The wounds on its chest and arm looked worse, red and angry, probably infected. The area around them was swollen. This thing had been lying here for 3 days, injured, unable to move much, unable to get food or water. It was dying, slowly but surely dying. I felt a wave of guilt wash over me. I should have come back sooner. I should have known it would be like this. Of course it couldn't take care of itself with wounds like that and only one working arm. I quickly set my pack down just inside the cave entrance and started pulling out supplies. The creature's eyes tracked my movements, more alert now. It recognized me. I could see that, but it was too weak to do much else. I grabbed a water bottle, opened it, and moved closer. Not all the way to the creature, but close enough to set it within reach of its good arm. Then I backed up and grabbed some of the food. I opened a can of salmon and set it down next to the water. Then some energy bars, some jerky. I laid it all out where the creature could reach it without having to move much. The creature looked at the items, then it looked at me. Its eyes were clearer now, more focused. It made a small sound halfway between a grunt and a whimper. A sound of acknowledgement, of gratitude, of relief. I backed away and sat near the entrance, giving it space. The creature slowly, painfully reached out and grabbed the water bottle. Its hand was shaking. It took a long time to bring the bottle to its mouth, and when it did, it drank slowly. Not the desperate gulps of before, but careful sips like swallowing hurt. When it finished the first bottle, it set it down and just lay there for a moment, breathing hard from the effort. When it had eaten as much as it could, it looked at me again, really looked at me. And I saw gratitude there. Deep, genuine gratitude. It understood what I was doing, understood that I'd come back, that I hadn't abandoned it. I stayed for another hour, just sitting there, making sure it was stable, making sure the food stayed down. Eventually, I gathered up the empty containers and backed toward the entrance. The creature watched me go. I told myself I'd be back tomorrow, that this would be a routine now, every day until it was strong enough to survive on its own. I left the rest of the supplies just inside the cave entrance where the creature could reach them when it was ready. Then I headed home feeling better than I had in 3 days. It was alive. It would survive. I'd make sure of it. The next morning, I was up early. I loaded up my pack again with fresh supplies and made the hike to the cave. When I got there, I found that the supplies from yesterday were gone, eaten or drunk or stashed somewhere. That was a good sign. I called out before entering. This time I heard a response, a low rumble of acknowledgement from inside the cave. I took that as permission to approach. The creature was sitting up when I came in. Not standing, but sitting upright with its back against the cave wall. A huge improvement from yesterday. Its eyes were clearer, more alert. It watched me enter and gave a small nod of greeting. I set down fresh supplies in the same spot as yesterday. More water, more food. This time I'd brought some fresh fish I'd caught that morning from a stream near my house. I'd gutted and cleaned them but left them whole. I figured the creature probably preferred fresh meat to canned. The creature looked at the fish with what I swear was interest, maybe even pleasure. It reached for them immediately, picking one up and examining it. Then it ate it, and I could tell this was better than the canned stuff. It ate both fish I'd brought, eating faster than yesterday with more strength. We fell into a routine after that. Every morning I'd wake up, gather supplies, and make the hike to the cave. Every visit, the creature looked a little better, a little stronger, a little more like it might actually survive this. On the 5th day, it was standing at the cave entrance when I arrived, like it had been waiting for me. Like it knew roughly when I'd show up and had positioned itself to greet me. It looked so much better, alert, aware, almost strong. It gave me that slow nod when it saw me coming, and I swear there was something like pleasure in its expression, like it was genuinely happy to see me. I kept varying the food I brought. Some days it was fish, some days it was meat. I brought berries when I could find them, though they were mostly done for the season. I brought nuts, some vegetables from my garden. I was trying to figure out what it preferred, what gave it the most energy. Fish seemed to be the favorite, followed by meat. The fruits and vegetables it ate, but without the enthusiasm it showed for the protein. Each day we'd do the same thing. I'd arrive, set down the supplies, and the creature would eat while I sat near the entrance. We'd spend maybe an hour together, just existing in the same space. Not talking, obviously, not really communicating beyond simple nods and gestures. But there was something there, some kind of bond forming, some kind of understanding. By the 6th day, the creature looked almost normal, still favoring its good arm, still using the crutch, but much stronger. The wounds were healing well. It moved with more confidence. It was eating more. It was going to be okay. On the 7th day, it demonstrated something new. It showed me some plants it had gathered from around the cave entrance. Chewed them up and pressed them against its wounds. Some kind of natural medicine, I guess. Something it knew about that helped with healing. I watched in fascination. It was doctoring itself, using knowledge it had somehow acquired or learned or inherited. This thing wasn't just intelligent, it had culture. knowledge that was passed down somehow. On the 8th day, when I arrived, the creature was actually outside the cave, standing maybe 50 yards away near a small stream. It was washing itself, using its good hand to clean the fur on its torso and face. When it saw me, it stopped and watched me approach. Then, for the first time, it took a few steps toward me instead of waiting for me to come closer. It was initiating contact. That felt significant somehow, like I'd been accepted, trusted. I set down the supplies like always, but this time the creature came closer before I backed away. Maybe 10 feet instead of 20, close enough that I could see the individual hairs on its body, close enough that I could see its chest moving with each breath, close enough to really appreciate just how massive and powerful it was. But I wasn't scared. I should have been probably, but I wasn't. On the last morning I went to deliver the food. When I made the hike toward the cave, I saw movement in the distance, up on a ridge above where the cave was located. I stopped and looked up. The creature was standing there, not at the cave, but higher up, out in the open on the ridge. It was standing at its full height, no crutch in sight, silhouetted against the gray sky. It looked powerful, magnificent, intimidating. This was what it really was, stripped of weakness and injury. This was the creature in its natural state, a being perfectly adapted to survive in one of the harshest environments on Earth. For a moment, I felt that old fear again, that primal recognition of something bigger and stronger than me, that awareness of being in the presence of a superior predator. But then it saw me, and that moment of fear passed, replaced by something else. Respect, maybe, awe, gratitude for having been able to witness something so few people ever would. The creature looked right at me across the distance. Then it did something I'll never forget. It gave me one more nod, deeper and more pronounced than any before. A nod that seemed to contain everything: acknowledgement, gratitude, respect, farewell. It held up its good arm, palm facing me, finger spread, in what looked unmistakably like a wave, or maybe a salute, a gesture of goodbye. Then it turned and walked away, moving steadily and powerfully into the deep forest. Its gait was smooth now, no longer labored. It moved like something that belonged there, that was part of the landscape. Within moments, it had disappeared completely into the trees, swallowed by the wilderness like it had never been there at all. I stood there watching the spot where it vanished for a long time, maybe 10 minutes, maybe more. Just staring at the empty forest, processing what had just happened, understanding that this was goodbye, that the creature had recovered enough to survive on its own, that it didn't need me anymore, that it was moving on. I felt a strange mix of emotions: satisfaction that I'd made a difference, that I'd saved a life and seen it through to recovery, sadness that I'd probably never see it again, relief that it was okay, that it was strong enough to survive, wonder at what I'd experienced, at what I'd been allowed to witness. I hiked up to the cave one last time. It was empty. Completely empty. No sign that anything had ever lived there except for some disturbed dirt and pine needles on the floor. The crutch I'd given it was lying near the entrance, left behind like a gift, or maybe just abandoned as no longer needed. I picked it up, feeling the weight of it, remembering watching the creature learn to use it. I left it there, leaning against the cave wall. Maybe someday it would need it again, or maybe another injured creature would find it and figure out what it was for. I turned around and started the long walk home, carrying an empty pack and a head full of memories that would last a lifetime. That was almost a year ago now. I've never seen the creature again. Sometimes, when I'm out hunting in the fall, I find tracks that might be from it. Footprints that are too big to be human in places where no human should be walking. arranged in patterns that suggest bipedal movement. I like to think it's still out there somewhere, surviving, living its life in the deep wilderness. Thriving with that arm that never worked quite right, but apparently doesn't matter so much when you're strong and know your environment. That creature is still out there. Somewhere in the vast Alaskan wilderness, there's a Bigfoot with a damaged arm that never healed right, carrying a memory of a human who chased away a grizzly bear and brought food for 9 days straight. A creature that learned to use a makeshift crutch and nodded in gratitude and waved goodbye from a ridge before disappearing into the trees. And knowing that such a thing exists and survived and is out there living its life, makes the wilderness a more amazing place than I ever imagined. For more interesting stories, check this out.